Chile here with Sirius Taurus Moon. This is Mercury, our ascendant applying to Mars in Gemini, and midheaven 25 degrees Aquarius. So, Moon 22 in Libra. And I'm following the separation, the gradual separation of the Barbault basket. And many themes have been coming up. Um, with this Mercury retrograde ruling over Mars and ruled by the moon, there is a sense that Mars, I talked about Mars as separation or separation from, let's say, past relations, past, um, if there were agreements, but I think here is more like acknowledging that there was never an agreement. Separation is on the basis that there was never an agreement, that somebody never agreed. Agreement would require separate housing, separate independent resources. And culturally, Jupiter going through Leo, both within the people and the leader, or the people and the elite, or the people, the leader, and the society of the elite, then the culture where a woman living safe and free in her own home, free to say yes, no, and maybe at every juncture of the road, not being projected on any things that, not having to compromise anything, not erotic, not relational. And here is the thing, the spiritual awareness, because Jupiter is also the spiritual, the philosophical, the religious, that nothing that subjugates, nothing that creates trauma bonds is actually real. Even when it comes to wealth perceptions, which I addressed in previous episodes. And nothing that tries to collapse people and children into trauma bonds will ever be real, will ever be true. Nor is it true, and when it uses the material to try to collapse people into spirituality, it is not materialized. We see it a lot with the Epstein dossiers. They try to cover up the Epstein so something pops up in Israel. Try to cover up that so something pops up in Europe. And this is because the actual sovereignty is also the life energy, and is also in spirit and in matter. So question of love versus money no longer exists. The sun is both the heart, the vulnerable, open, trusting heart, which is the healthy heart, rather than the heartbroken heart or the bitter heart, and gold. there's no question of sex or love, lover or wife, Madonna or whore, because the embodied sexuality, where the life energy goes through the heart, it aligns the chakras, it aligns the root chakra. It's our land, our survivalistic need. Sex cannot happen in this chakra unless all other chakras all the way to the crown are aligned. The people mistake that, they don't know that. Why? Because sex is not rape. Then the relational chakra. Relational chakra is secure attachment. It's not trauma bond. And it is true that, let's say, certain groups of many classes, including elite, have been related on basis of trauma bonds. They say you cannot treat woman, let's say a sexually violent woman, and then act lovingly, and then say, well, if you're going to abolish any sort of abuse, any sort of violation, consistently, and be of secure attachment, then if there's compatibility and a person outgrew the pattern, well, then maybe they will meet someone that is compatible with them. But if not, all intimate relations are susceptible, and the oppressive relation will always receive a mirroring of oppression. Then the person that was trying to relate in that way will always feel betrayed, not really, that somebody doesn't really, and here's the thing, you cannot really be with them. People expect, if a person, let's say, expect Christianity, as a person expects submission. Submission doesn't exist. What is submission? The only way where healthy erotic and non-erotic relationship exists is when both people are connected, embodied, have the innocence of self. Now, it means that people can experience rejection, but they must understand that in terms of secure attachment, the person that has done this, how should I say that? If they ran into that friction, in terms of secure attachment, in terms of eroticism, they're being asked to up-level. And up-level is saying goodbye to certain economy that was based on money laundering, of crimes that were based on addiction, on addiction, what getting people addicted to type of relations not good for them, to type of sexuality that's not good for them. Not about virtual vice, not about rules, not about Christ or Antichrist. Both of them are incompatible. And not about power in a way that is power over. Why? Because those power-related societies, they always had a betrayal or a treason involved with them. A deception, betrayal component. Why they were associated with the type where people had to, let's say, spy and then knock down competitors. And then they climbed up the ladder of their societies by being the most powerful in all forms of power. But to have intimate relations and wealth that is not a fiscal bubble. This is why Eris is both the planet of plagues and the elite. Why? Because the elite that is reliant on constantly having to cause chaos to be included, constantly being based on trauma bonds, eventually dies of some sort of inflammation, which we know as the plague. And the let's say the vaccines are inflammation causing. And then there is over reliance on artificial production of children that is never, and again, I'm talking about the elite here. Okay? People have been affected by something that they didn't choose. And it's also true to the elite. But in the elite, there are a lot of indoctrinations where people are supposed to, how should I say that, to show that they're grateful, show that they're choosing. Even though it's not. Then I never consented, but I was also not born within, let's say, certain aristocratic sectors that let's say would take children on physical um, grounds to certain schools and so on. Now, this is where even when person is initiated, first of all, usually they didn't agree to be initiated. It dawns on them. So there's an element of trying to appeal to them by providing the best of initiations. And initiation has to support what? Sovereignty, secure attachment, embodiment, honoring the non-erotic, honoring the child, honoring the adult, both when they say yes, no, maybe. Else it creates an understanding that esoteric tradition was grounded in, let's say, child trafficking, human trafficking. And those are traditions that, let's say, had elaborated trees. We say in linguistics, the universal grammar hypothesis that has its pros and cons, talks about grammatical trees. So we see a grammatical tree of a language form that collapses. If the language doesn't have a word for a woman, without that woman being subjugated like Eve, or exiled like Lilith, or considered a whore when she herself was raped, then that esoteric tradition has nothing to offer not only to women but to men. It has to sort the wheat from the chaff, and indeed, along such esoteric traditions, we'll see people like Prophet Amos, people like Prophet Jeremiah. Some people talk about the medical implication, the teeth of the children rotting. Some people talking about the implication on the people, exile, persecution, due to ritual abuse and trafficking. This is Prophet Amos, to be 100% authentic. Yes, with Christianity, even the notion of the cosmic pregnancy, when in praxis, Mother of Jesus was raped at puberty. Islam Muhammad waiting for 6 years old Aisha to turn 9 has become a classic amongst, let's say, heretics. Quoting, and then libertarianism, which has been a sort of a Gnostic cult, had to preserve the child trafficking. Now, what is had to preserve? I addressed this in previous episodes. People were in upbringing that was emotionally deprived. It was extremely turbulent. Trauma bond does not consist only of abuse. It consists also of segments of authentic love and care. Authentic love and care. And you see, because the heart leaks somehow. And then people themselves have gone through all kinds of things that are supposed to create an artificial separation between spirit and matter. An artificial separation between wealth or gold and the open trusting heart, where the metal gold prevents personality, let's say the split axis. The metal silver safeguards for emotional stability, not lack of ebb and flow. That's metal of the moon. Society where people don't have these metals, and again, it's not about an entire plane being built of the metal. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not necessarily the point. But about people being able to work with those metals, being able to wear a silver ring or a golden ring. Societies where, let's just say, the priesthood is imbued with child abuse. And here's the thing, those things are never going to be upfront. But it is seen through the teachings. It is seen through the scriptures. It is seen through the requirement to marry or to be in, let's say, somewhat unequal relations. It is seen through the closest approximate of equal relations being only transactional relations, or relations that have strong transactional component, what they call mutually beneficial relations. And this is seen as the closest to love. Well, love requires something that is inhumane to achieve, so that people will normalize, particularly in upper ranks. I hear people that talk about old money, and they say they trust not the bloodline, not everyone around, because people will betray if the price is fit. But in fact, in secure attachment, people will less tend to betray, because to begin with, they're not easily swayed, let's say, fiscally or monetarily. There has to be compatibility, but other than that, um, the secure attachment will always be stronger than the external things when person is basically not deprived. When person is coming from trauma bonds, then there will always be betrayal, because a person cannot be true to themselves without um, setting boundaries to trauma bond, which would be experienced like betrayal to the people that learn to relate through trauma bond. And those betrayals are accepted as long as the person is still in cycles of trauma bonds. But and to be in secure attachment is not about, oh, but do you offer secure attachment? When people are next to secure attachment, they align. A lot of the things that seem impossible, even dealing with rejection, or even erotic rejection, which seems like the point of limerence, is essentially when people grow into secure attachment and relaxed arousal, they understand that it was never rejection at first place, it was incompatibility. But and when people are, you know, how should I say that? The people idealize abusive relations. Um, or have misplaced arousal. As the result of violence. Their soul will always seek the truth. This is how elites sometimes can gravitate towards people that are at the juncture of the truth. Because they have all the money in the world. They have harms, they have made all the crimes and got away with them. What's the one thing that they don't have? Is the thing that changes everything. Is love that is actually loving. Is secure attachment, embodiment, and they tend to gravitate to people that don't reject money but are not swayed by money. Don't reject abundance but are not swayed by the imitation of abundance. And those people do usually not necessarily be among the elite. I'm not saying it cannot happen, but and this is also something Eris has been known for. It's known for within the elite, the people that hang with lower class. And these are people that are not, that they don't fear intimacy, but intimacy has to be on basis of secure attachment, relaxed arousal. And then when there are the challenges, now also for the people that are those people, that are the ones that are gravitated to, many times they're single. They can be wearing a marriage ring. But if they're wearing a marriage ring, it's not because they're married necessarily, but because they protect themselves from those who try to put them into arranged marriage or forced relations. Or if the single It could be wearing gold for aligning of the personality, for the heart. Okay, there's compatibility with the sun, or a sun remediation. And they didn't necessarily go to astrologer that told them to do so. They comprised this either intuitively or from their own sense of self. It can be more compatible astrologically or less compatible astrologically, but even if there would be their own editing, because that's their own voice, their own intuition, and it's not about how should I say, not having reverence for experienced or gurus or teachers. It's about that sense of self that comes before everything. It can learn from people, but always has its own intuition. They say, hey, this teaching applies. That part of the teaching maybe will apply some way in the future. Maybe needs to be edited or refined in some way. What they're not subscribed to is the indoctrinations where people have to do exactly like the guru says and then receive the gnosis. Why? Because that is still susceptible to cult-like. They can apply things the guru says and then they see, does it work? Does it not work? What is their own intuition? And then they can have their own gnosis. And they can learn from more than one teacher. And also can become a source of teaching. M. Spiracy really addressed it when she says, also, let's just say the guru is also a student. Now, but it's not just about Earth being a school, let's say, which I like that M. Spiracy tended to that point because it's an important point. Not everything is about, oh, that thing was a teaching or that thing was karma to correct and so on. Some things just don't need to be in the world. Now, the people that certain people are gravitated to, they don't come with the guru-student relations. Because it's a conversation between sovereigns. But here's the thing, but the people that were used to something different, the sovereignty to that level is still being established. And usually that component would be somehow mutual. And let's say if somebody wants to date such person, like the people that people gravitate to, then they will not ask for, let's say, oh, to buy me a house or to buy me a this or nothing that is privat, that is unusual. They will say, okay, let's say we would be dating, then we would look for a test for STDs. The medical system has to be supportive of patient sovereignty. So the courteous move by the elite is to make the medical system not just for the particular person, but for humanity, supportive of patient sovereignty. And I tell you, I think this is why those juxtapositions come to arrive. Or, let's say, there's fear of the inequality of power. Those people will never be, they will not be at the looking for information on how to date rich. Those people may even be surrounded by rich and powerful people that wanted to date them, and they said, okay, that person was too controlling. That person wanted to fund my studies, but the studies need to be honoring of the individuality and the imagination and the sovereignty of the students, even if they are mathematics. That person had a lot of businesses, let's say food industry or housing or whatnot, but the housing sector needs to accommodate, whether through the private sector or through the public sector, for each and every individual to be able to have house and nourishing food from the mundanest of jobs, from the most partial part-time jobs on the planet. And those things are prerequisite for a relation or potential relation between, let's say, these people that the elite can gravitate to when they're ready to transform, or when they are at a transformation crisis. They can be in their current return. When Chiron was conjoining Aries, there were some people who would be around the Chiron return. And suddenly they saw parts of them accepted that weren't accepted before, and even radically accepted. Say, hey, that person grew up within that society. In that society was so and so and so and so. They grew up with it. They're not to blame. They grew up in a situation where people would try to emotionally blackmail them. Then they received training that would be reading of empathy. It's actually because they were very empathetic. Now, but then there's also the notions of what needs to change in society, but also the notion of, wait a second, the compatibilities that are even, for some people it can be genetic, or for some people it can be, I learned recently that RH, thanks to conspiracy, minus and plus, the ABI, RH minus and plus, they find it difficult to have genetic compatibility with fertility. So for stuff like lunar nakshatra, navel lunar nakshatra, if they are not same constellation, then they will have incompatibility to do with housing ideas in children. And then what was even what the perceived rejection is actually not a rejection at all. It's actually acknowledgement that both are deserving of space to create and home that is their own. And it's better for them to, let's say, not co-parent, so that there wouldn't be even loss of children. So this is different perspective than, let's say, I think in Vedic traditions of arranged marriage, there are these awarenesses, but, this is a strong but, within the circles, and I don't know how it works for, let's say, Indians, within the circles of elite, there sometimes are requirements for the consultational to do the things that would preserve, let's say, the trauma. But this is why the elite gravitate towards the people that are not swayed by that. And oftentimes it would be, if there was internal healing, it was, let's say, at least as in spite of the system, of the consultation system, of the medical system, as thanks to the system. And I've been incredibly generous with that assessment. Why? Because why at least why at least as half as? Because, like I said, trauma bond consists of genuine love and care and power and manipulation. And it's thought to be that the power manipulation part is an inherent thing that the parents should teach the children, sometimes through the worst atrocities, and so that they wouldn't be fooled in business. But secure attachment, honoring the non-erotic, honoring the erotic, honoring the place of childhood, relieves let's just say, creates discernment. And it's this discernment is not going to be about, oh, that person is a crook. No. It's going to be seen differently. It's going to be seen not that the person is a crook, but it's going to be seen the depriving, or how the person, where the person was deprived of secure attachment in a way that biases or closes their thinking. Where there have been, for every, yes, for every, with people that, for every place the person is overbearing, there's also a place where they are people pleasing. And usually, unless they run into certain energy where that energy is public, then and that usually be by intermediary that did not necessarily have the highest good of the of either of them, and that have to work in spite of. Yes, not saying always, but now, naturally, within elites, there are competing schools. There are the people that tell you, all money doesn't eat that food because it absorbs toxins. And there are the people who would point a person to a particular restaurant because they are, let's say, invested in it, and it, I don't know, works with certain business model, or they want people to meet around in that particular business. And this is where people have to be, yes, discerning. um, but this is also and it would never be blunt and in your face. It would be, it can be blunt and in your face, but it would never be blunt and in your face in terms of the expression. But this is also where such people, let's say, will ask for the world to change, and usually what they ask for is relevant to the people that gravitate towards them. Whether those people will make that change or not is a question, is an open-ended question, but those changes can be, or frictions around that can create certain incompatibilities. For example, let's say a person is um, invited to, or that attempts to usher a person to be in particular place, in particular this, in order to meet somebody very special. Now, before that meeting, there can be fear that arises to say, wait a second, what is the purpose of the meeting? What is, are we to meet in a public place? Um, what are the spiritual guidelines of the community where that person is coming from? Is that person a part of those spiritual guidelines? Um, what are they involved with in terms of passive income, entrepreneurship? Is it compatible? And do I have the safety to return? Or do I even have my own home? Now, usually, those worries would be also in the other side. Where are they taking me? Is it for my actual security? Um, some people in certain echelons even um, they may have home, but they might not be able to see it. And of course, um, if it's something, let's say, more of intimate in nature, then they usually are not about love affairs, let's say. And then, and which would give an immediate no to many attempts to juxtapose because the separation between love and money or Madonna and whore doesn't exist psychoerotically but also not fiscally. So they will be expecting the world to adjust. Um, protection on basis of patronage, the, then um, how should I say that? In a global village is not suffice. And this also shows that, and this is also why a certain elite would gravitate to certain people, because they run into threshold and say, oh, these people, they're not swayed by certain things, and they're also not here to exploit. But they're also not here to be exploited. Now that, amongst the circles of the wealth, let's say, is now amongst the common people, the awareness of the struggles also of the elite is going to be needed. Let's say the medical health system, both mental and physical, is not a point of exploitation. So if a person tries to date a common person and they don't have the means to change, let's say, the medical system, so on what basis do they want to be not rejected? can people date in this society where the swaying towards places that not so supportive for women? There's no society where people can date in. Let alone procreate. So many, the flooding of requests to assisted death. Um, People cannot talk about the sacredness of life and exploit life, in the sense that where there is Madonna Chor distinction, where there is love or money, where there is you will get everything but only under this God, then one cannot say life is sacred because they violate life. When people are abused, one cannot talk about the sacredness of life without applying for assisted death in such society, or for the society to change. Lilith on the descendant, as we speak. And mid-heaven from aloud. Moon. Moon speaker. And the moon is applying to square the sun and sextile Lilith. Ascendant is ruled by retrograde Mercury, about Sun, and Venus. How is Venus? Venus is squaring Mars. So I would not although for speaker talisman supposed to be, but the ruler of the moon squaring Mars, I think is challenging the election. It's friction between Venus and Mars. Yes, or is it? Yeah. The moon was trining Mars, but Venus squaring Mars, and that can create a friction. The moon speaker, and more things to do with the record. Now, here's the thing: people that those circles gravitate to, even when it comes to banking, it needs to be free from, let's say, the types of trade. How should I say that? Not just zero usury, but also zero trafficking, zero child abuse. The traded companies need to actually provide value rather than be a biological hazard pack of even a good component. The because banks that don't hold to these standards eventually collapse. We're about to have a collapse not just of the currency system but also of the banking system. We'll have new bank. Think about Bank of Amsterdam collapsed following the two books and Dutch East India addressed the Huguenot timelines and the converted timelines, the converted Christians. It were the Jews, it were Huguenots that were massacred. And again, why? Because in their Genesis we still did not have full equity to women. Women were in better situation than other, relatively better than most, but it was still not suffice. And the scam, main part of the scam, was to loot the silver from Spain that regulated the currency of the people that were susceptible to Inquisition. And he still dropped the Bank of Amsterdam. They had silver, they had gold. Alchemically, it's good to have the silver and gold, but the scriptures were not advanced enough. And this is because of the practices, also of the people, also of the elite, where back then nobody knew what is secure attachment. Back then nobody knew what is willing consent, and that the scent is not just the perfume, but also the scent of willing consent. And not something that and this is the before, during, and after. I think it was only in the 1800s where there was the invention of soap. So some of the needs for soap has to do with the hygiene that goes into embodied sexuality. Some of it is a good use of soap. Let's say if I work in the garden and I walk barefoot on the soil, good use of soap is called for. It's not that I will become sick, the other way around, but I can, let's say, use the soap to separate and to clean under the nails and enjoy the pampering of the self, which is also relaxation bath after, let's say, either working in the garden or as the gardens of leisure. About gardening, I think Aries in Taurus will bring a lot of good things and challenging things. Do all gardens need to look like Persia? I don't know. Rewilding is very important, and gardening as leisure. They say that people that do gardening as leisure tend to have inner aggressions. So how much of it would be sorted out when there's no inflammation or when the relation is based on secure attachment, and the eroticism is based on relaxed arousal rather than misplaced arousal, and when the treason components are not there because there's a natural quality of wealth. And this can bring very successful companies that will need not rely on the military frontier as much to bring renewal. And then the military production will also not be challenged so much, because let's say a home that can sustain, or a car that can sustain storm, flood, earthquake, is also useful if there is crisis that is military. But before there would be military crisis, the junctures of trade, the junctures of diplomacy can be on, let's just say, I talked about Cuba wanting to create water dependency in the Middle East. And I talked about the fact that the transactional relations and the intelligence culture that was affected by them prevented coming to fruition. Now, Cuba had a lot of spiritual growth. He also had some scandals with housing and hiring police to evacuate people. But those divisions, they can come from him, they can come from people under him. But he also had a successor that had good advices when it came to, let's say, paying a lot of the debt that was bond related, where the people were invested in him and he didn't fail their bonds entirely. But then the component on transactional relations also require for erotic transformation that is very profound. It is now people that are, let's say, billionaires or trillionaires, they have to transmute so much, and there is expansion and contraction. And remember, those naming certain people and they say, "Oh, this person is no longer a trillionaire." They're probably not homeless either, but this is also the expansion and contraction that is natural in a changing world. Let's say when people build a new house, they usually live in a tent or in a place next to the land where they built. So if they had, I don't know, a big mansion or a big palace in some place, then at that place, or either they fly to the location, so they don't take all the things with them on the plane. So anyway, there is a little bit of contraction before expansion. And some contractions are, let's say, shedding properties that have been liability. Before the Trumps purchased Mar-a-Lago, Mar-a-Lago was a grand, it was called, yes, according to these old money channels on YouTube, it was called a white elephant, the gift of a white elephant. Why? Because go care for a white elephant. Go care for an elephant that has to have a place, they have to have food, they have to have training, they have to have acres to run, and so that they would not be held in confinement. And this is considered a gift that is a liability, a gift that can bankrupt. And that is what Mar-a-Lago was. But there was a lady that bought the place, and then she had to sustain the place, and it was so expensive that she had to sell the place. Now, the wisdom of being able to set a tent in the woods and only carry a gun so that you will have to shoot in the air if there is a bear coming around is relevant. Why am I saying that? It's not about choosing the bear. It's about cultural culture where one doesn't have to fear. Because when I say